Ever stop and think about how we learn? You know, how a little kid goes from just kind of pointing at stuff to actually solving complex problems? Well, today, we're diving into the mind of Lev Vygotsky, a psychologist who totally revolutionized how we think about that incredible journey.
It really is the biggest question, isn't it? How do our minds grow and develop? Turns out the answer to that question sparked a huge intellectual showdown.
And right at the center of it all were these two absolute giants of psychology. What's wild is that they were contemporaries working around the same time, but they never actually met. And yet their competing ideas would go on to shape basically everything we know about learning today.
So let's start unpacking this puzzle. And first, you got to meet the two main players in this debate. Okay, so picture this. In one corner, you've got Jean Piaget. For him, a child is like a little scientist, exploring the world all on their own, learning by touching, building, and figuring things out. But in the other corner, you have Lev Vygotsky, who basically said, whoa, hold on, you're missing the most important part, the people, the culture, the whole world surrounding that child.
And that one key difference in how they saw the world led to this massive disagreement, one that gets right to the heart of a really fundamental question.
See, Piaget viewed development as a kind of staircase. He believed a child had to climb to a certain step, reach a specific level of mental maturity before they could even begin to learn certain things. For him, development had to come first. You just had to be ready.
And this, right here, is the main event. For Piaget, development unlocks the door for learning to happen. But Vygotsky, he flipped that script completely. He argued that the very act of learning is what drives our development. Learning comes first.
So you might be asking, how does that even work? Well, for Vygotsky, the secret ingredient was simple. It's all about our social world.
Vygotsky's entire theory really boils down to two huge ideas. First, our minds don't develop in a vacuum. They're shaped by the time and place we live in. And second, every culture gives us this incredible mental toolkit. Things like language, art, even number systems. He called them sign systems. And these aren't just things to memorize, they're like the operating system our brains use to make sense of everything. Now this is where it gets really mind-bending. Vygotsky argued that learning isn't some solo mission. It starts as a conversation. A skill literally exists between people first, in a shared activity or a chat, long before it becomes a part of our own individual mind. And what's the end goal of all this social learning? Vygotsky called it self-regulation. It's that magic moment when you don't need the help anymore, because the external process has become your own internal voice, guiding you as you solve problems all on your own. Okay, so it's a pretty cool theory, right? But Vygotsky didn't just leave it there as an idea. He gave us a practical roadmap for how this social learning actually works. And he called it the zone of proximal development, or ZPD for short. Just think of it like this. It's not what you can already do easily, and it's not what's impossible. The ZPD is that perfect sweet spot of what you could do if you just had a little guidance from someone who knows how. This right here is the ultimate teachable moment. When someone is in their ZPD, they are primed for a breakthrough. And getting the right help at that exact time doesn't just help them check a box on a task, it literally fires up their development and pushes them forward. So, what do we call that action that help you get inside the ZPD? It's got a great name, scaffolding. Just like the scaffolding on a building, it provides support when you need it most, and then it's taken away piece by piece as you get strong enough to stand on your own. It's really like a dance. The expert or the teacher gives a ton of support at the beginning, but then they slowly start to step back. They fade into the background as the learner steps up, taking on more and more until, finally, they've got it all by themselves. The source material gives us this perfect analogy from Mark Twain's life. He talked about learning to be a steamboat pilot and how the expert pilot would talk him through every single turn in the river. But over time, the expert got quieter and quieter, making Twain figure it out himself, only jumping in to prevent a disaster. That is scaffolding in a nutshell.
So this all sounds great in theory, but what does it actually look like in the real world, say in a classroom?
Well, it means that Vygotsky's work is pretty much the blueprint for all modern cooperative learning. Seriously, anytime a teacher says, okay, let's get into groups, they're drawing directly from Vygotsky's playbook. He gave us the why behind working together.
And it just makes sense, right? When students work together, they're constantly operating in each other's zones of proximal development. They get to hear their friends think out loud, which makes the whole reasoning process visible instead of some hidden mystery.
That's why having a slightly more skilled peer tutor you can be so incredibly powerful. It's pure, effective scaffolding.
Ultimately, Vygotsky's whole perspective just reframes what learning is. It's not this lonely internal struggle, it's a social, guided exploration that we get to take with other people.
So look, if you take away just one thing from all this, let it be this. For Vygotsky, we don't just sit around and wait for our brains to be ready. We learn. And that very act of learning with others is the powerful engine that pulls our development forward.
And that leaves us with a really powerful final thought. This isn't just about how kids learn in school, it's about how all of us learn, every single day. So ask yourself, what skill is sitting in your zone of proximal development right now, and what could you achieve with just a little bit of help?